So when I was a child, I was put on psychiatric medication, and as a result, apparently, it made it very difficult to think reasonably, and I behaved in an aggressive manner. When I was about 21 years old, my outpatient psychiatrist had taken me off all of my psychiatric medication, and I immediately calmed down. I was able to think more clearly. I was no longer as unreasonable or violent or things of that nature. So what's interesting, and people will say, well, this is the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Well, I'm going to show you there's more than that. So common and well-documented side effects of psychiatric drugs include mania, psychosis, hallucinations, depersonalization, suicidal ideation, heart attack, stroke, and sudden death. So keep that in mind, and I've gone through this in other videos, and I'm going to deal with this in my orthomolecular approach to autonomic dysfunction, which is something I have as a result of being on these medications. But common and well-documented side effects of psychiatric drugs include mania, which means you're, overly exuberant about nothing. Psychosis, which means you're seeing and hearing things that aren't there, especially, would be the easiest way of putting it. Hallucinations. Now, psychosis can also have to do with delusional thinking, which means thinking patterns that don't mesh with reality. Depersonalization, which unfortunately is something I have, which seems to be related to the autonomic dysfunction. Suicidal ideation, which is something that I have suffered from. Heart attack, stroke, and sudden death. Okay, so let's move on here. So you're probably saying, oh, well, that's just CCHR. That's the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. They don't like medications. Well, this is from Psychiatric News. The website's name is psychiatryonline.org. So a link between several types of psychotropic medications and violent behavior towards others has been documented in a recent study. The medications most strongly linked to violent behavior were the smoking cessation drug varenicline and antidepressants regardless of class. The association was made, so that would mean things like Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac, okay? The association was made by Thomas Moore, Joseph Glenmullen, MD, and Kurt Furberg, MD, a PhD. Moore is senior scientist for drug safety and policy at the Institute for Safe Medication Practices in Horsham, Pennsylvania. Ironically, Horsham, Pennsylvania. The ISMP is a nonprofit organization that educates healthcare providers and the public about safe medication practices. Okay, after 10 days of using the smoking cessation drug, a 24-year-old woman woke her boyfriend up, started beating him in bed because he looked so peaceful, and then later attempted suicide. After using the smoking cessation drug varenyl, whatever, for 42 days, a 42-year-old man punched a stranger at a bowling alley. See, this is stuff that doesn't even make sense. After using again, the same drug, for 8 days, a man choked his wife in a fit of rage, then hung himself. 7 days after using that same drug, a 54-year-old woman became violent and wanted to kill someone. 14 days after using that drug, a 21-year-old woman threatened her mother with a shotgun, then locked herself in the bathroom. A woman who had been using that medication for 7 days punched a policeman and threatened others. 4 days after using the medication, a 27-year-old man became aggressive. He attempted to kill himself with a shotgun, but survived. 21 days after using that drug, a 29-year-old woman struck an acquaintance twice in the face, and then started smashing doors in her home and beating on her truck. In In a study published in the December 15th, 2010 PLOS, one of the researchers used the 2004 to 2009 data from the Food and Drug Administration Adverse Event Reporting System. They found that during the study, 780,169 serious adverse events of one kind or another had been reported for 484 drugs, and that of those serious adverse events, 1,937 had been acts of violence. Okay? They defined a violent event as any case report containing one or more of the following: homicide, physical assault, physical abuse, homicidal ideation, or violence-related symptom, but not more ambiguous descriptions such as crime, aggression, belligerence, or hostility. The researchers so these are actual acts of violence. They're not just, not belligerence, not hostility, not being aggressive. These are real acts of actual violence or homicidal ideation. The researchers then set out to see whether any of the 484 drugs that had been disproportionately linked with the acts of violence. To be disproportionately, a drug had to be associated with, to be disproportionately linked, a drug had to be associated with at least 5 cases of violence. Okay, the researchers found that 324 of the 484 drugs, 67%, had no link with violence. Okay, blah, blah, blah. However, 31 of the drugs, 6%, were found to be disproportionately linked with violent cases. These drugs included that smoking cessation drug, 11 antidepressants. So it's not just one antidepressant. It's 11 antidepressants, three drugs, so amphetamines, 3 drugs for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so amphetamines, and 5 hypnotics and sedatives. Moreover, of the 484 drugs evaluated, the smoking cessation drug had the largest number of violence cases. Okay? Now I'm going to move on here. What I want to show here is that these psychotropic medications are causing the very symptoms that psychiatrists, social workers, and others in the related field of mental health claim to be treating these symptoms, which are essentially side effects of these medications. So, overactive, aggressive, disruptive, and agitated behavior is associated with the use of psychotropic medications in schizophrenia. Okay? So, use of antipsychotics and antidepressants is associated with reduced risk of remission, blah, blah, blah. Overactive, aggressive, disruptive, or agitated behavior can pose major challenges to some patients with schizophrenia, blah, 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 blah. Adding these acts of violence in the psychiatry also significantly, blah, blah, blah. Okay, antipsychotic medications in particular remain the treatment of choice, yada, yada, yada. Antipsychotic medications are da. You can read this on your own. My point is, these drugs are causing the aggressive behaviors and things of that nature in these populations. If people are wondering why there were so few cases of psychotic violence in the early days before these medications, but now, usually these people were passive and withdrawn and things like that, and then all of a sudden you have more cases of violence. Well, might be the psychotropic medications that these people are being put on. A very popular class of drug to treat, essentially to treat attention deficit and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are amphetamines, which are exactly what you would think. Amphetamines, like methamphetamine, dextroamphetamine, the different types of amphetamines and related drugs such as blah, 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 which is Ritalin, are stimulant drugs. Stimulants speed up the central nervous system. They act like adrenaline, a hormone that is one of the body's natural stimulants. Other drugs with similar effects include cocaine, ecstasy, and caffeine, and many others. Where does it come from? Amphetamines were first introduced in the 1930s as a remedy for nasal congestion and marketed over the counter as an inhaler named Benzedrine. These drugs were also used medically to treat obesity and depression. Dr. Robert C. Atkins was famous, one of the things he was famous for was trying to outlaw. As I was saying, one of the things Dr. Atkins was famous for was attempting to outlaw the use of amphetamines for the treatment of obesity and related conditions like heart disease. Obviously, Dr. Atkins himself was a cardiologist, but these drugs are extremely dangerous, and obesity is actually very easily treated with most diets. I made a video in the past that shows essentially all diets work. It's a matter of, is the person actually going to eat the diet? And I showed that, you know, the Mediterranean diet, the Zone diet, and the Atkins diet, and I forget the other diet, but all of the major diets really do work with weight loss. There's no real excuse. It's just the fact that people want a quick fix. And unfortunately, for some people, that quick fix is amphetamines. And as I pointed out in the previous video with, what's-his-face, Tom Cruise, where the gentleman was stating, oh, well, if it worked for that person, if it worked for Brooke Shields, isn't it okay that these medications work for Brooke Shields? No, these medications are dangerous medications. Brooke Shields was taking antidepressants, as I showed just a second or so ago. Antidepressants have been linked to violent behavior. People don't need to be taking things that make them more violent. So pure amphetamines are white, odorless, bitter-tasting crystalline powders. Who uses it? Amphetamines were easy. When amphetamines were easy to get, many people used them to stay awake and to have more energy. Truck drivers, students, and athletes were especially likely to abuse amphetamines. Even recently, soldiers have been given amphetamines for endurance in battle. People with eating disorders may use these drugs to try and lose weight. How does it make you feel? How amphetamines make you feel depend on how much you use, how often and how long you use them, how you use them, by injection or orally, your mood, expectation and environment, your age, whether you have certain pre-existing medical or psychiatric conditions, whether you've taken any alcohol or other drugs, illegal, prescription, over-the-counter, etc. When amphetamines are injected or smoked, they reach the brain quickly and produce a rush or surge of euphoria immediately. The effects of amphetamines are often different from person to person. Amphetamines can make people alert, confident, and energetic, talkative, restless, and excited, feel a sense of power and superiority, tense and nervous, hostile and aggressive. In children who are hyperactive, however, amphetamines and related drugs in the correct doses, can have a calming effect. I find that hard to believe, and that's something I have not witnessed. Okay. How long does the feeling last? And also, is it worth the effect that it has on the heart? Amphetamines reduce hunger, increase breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Larger doses may cause fever, sweating, headache, nausea, blurred vision, very fast and irregular heartbeat, tremors, loss of coordination, and collapse. How long does the feeling last? The initial rush after injecting or smoking lasts only a minute. With some types of amphetamines, the stimulant effects last up to 12 hours. Some people may use amphetamines repeatedly over a period of several days to try to stay high. Is it addictive? When taken as prescribed, amphetamines and related drugs do not cause addiction. People that say that, this is what's funny, they say that you're not addicted to psychiatric medications, but yet you need to be weaned off. For people taking, and I've witnessed this with people on my caseload when I worked in mental health, people taking Ritalin or Adderall, if they were stopped immediately, they had very real withdrawal symptoms. Regular non-medical use of amphetamines can lead to tolerance, blah, blah, blah. Is it dangerous? Yes. Overdose can cause seizures, coma, and death due to burst blood vessels in the brain, heart failure, or very high fever. Amphetamines are linked to risky and violent behaviors and increased injury in sexually transmitted diseases. Amphetamines may cause bizarre or repetitive behavior, paranoia, and hallucinations. Injecting any drug can cause infections from used needles or impurities in the drug. Sharing needles with others can transmit hepatitis or HIV. What are the long-term effects of using it? Chronic use of amphetamines, such as when it's prescribed over a long period of time, can lead to serious physical and mental health problems. Because amphetamines reduce appetite and fatigue, they can cause vitamin and sleep deficiencies and malnutrition and make people more prone to illness. Regular use of amphetamines can also cause amphetamine-induced psychosis. Symptoms include hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, and bizarre and violent behavior. These symptoms usually disappear a few days or weeks after the drug use has stopped. Longer term, a few days or weeks after the drug use has stopped. So you're still in it for a couple days, okay? Longer-term studies support the efficacy and safety when taken as prescribed. Yeah,